We were talking about Keynesian cross, and from here we found equilibrium output level, equilibrium GDP level, so the equilibrium in the goods market. Yes. Then, in the previous class, we were talking about equilibrium in the money market. Yes. So today we will cross these two equilibriums, and we will, from goods market, we found equilibrium GDP. From monetary market, we found equilibrium interest rate, and today we will cross them, and we will find equilibrium in our economy in the short run. We will find equilibrium GDP and interest rate. So IS is about equilibrium in the goods market, LM in money market. So let's start number 3, because it's the big problem to solve. And let's read. Consider a closed economy whose short-run macroeconomic performance can be described by the ISLM model. Let's write down the parameters. Consumption equals to 200 plus 0.25 multiplied by disposable income. So here you, as you remember from Keynesian cross, 200 constant is autonomous consumption. Yes. Disposable income is our total income minus taxes. Yes. Such that we will spend on consumption and saving. And 0.25 is marginal propensity to consume. Then, what else do we have in the task? Investment equals to 150 plus 0.25 multiplied by output minus 1000 multiplied by interest rate. So here, in Keynesian cross, we assumed that investments are constant and they does not depend on interest rate. But now, as we're talking about equilibrium GDP and interest rate in our models for today, we assume that interest rate or that investment is negatively depends on interest rate. And why this happens? Let's maybe somebody knows why. We have here minus. If interest rate increases, why investments decreases? Who wants to explain this connection? Yelizey, please.
Probably because it is not as profitable because interest rate increases actually the, let me check, it decreases supply for money. And
Not
it is, oh no, oh yeah.
Supply?
Yeah, wait. Yeah, no, it's about the demand of money, so that the potential investor wouldn't invest in that case because it is not profitable for him, as was mentioned before. I think that Anastasia can explain it more precisely.
Okay. Anastasia, please.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but actually, so if okay, let's say so. If interest rates are increased, they it will tend to discourage investment because investments has like a higher opportunity cost, as I think, as I know, and with higher rates, it is like more expensive to borrow money from banks, and therefore like this savings, like using savings to finance investments has an opportunity cost of lower investment.
Yes, exactly. So the key thing here is that who invest money? Firms. Yes, our economic agent firms, it's spendings of firms. And we remember that the only economic agent that ask for credits in the financial market and in banking system is firm. Yes. So only firms use this credit money for investments. And now, if interest rate is higher, it is more expensive to borrow. Yes? So, more expensive to borrow, that means that the main borrowers, firms, will invest less. They will ask for a lower amount of credits and they will invest less. They use only this borrowed money for investments. Yes, now in our models. More expensive to borrow, so that means that they will decrease investments. And about opportunity costs, yes, you're absolutely right. So about opportunity costs, that means you were talking about this thing that investments always equal to savings. Yes, and if opportunity costs are high, then savings are high, are lower. Yes, and that means that investments are also lower. Opportunity costs lower. Yes, this also correct explanation. Good. Thank you. So then, this we explained this negative connection between interest rate and investments. Then, positive connection between GDP and investments, easy. Yes, I think you do not need to explain it. Then, let us write down one more thing from the task. Then, government spendings 250, they are always constant because it's the main one of the main instruments of fiscal policy from the government, so they are always constant. Then taxes, constant here, 200. This is all about goods market, but market of goods and services, like in Keynes and Cross. Then also we have information about money market. So this about goods market. And about money market. We have demand, real demand, y minus 8,000 multiplied by I. You remember that higher the aggregate output, then higher the demand for money, because we need more money for transactions. Yes, to work with this higher output. That means that between money demand and GDP, here is positive connection. But the higher interest rate, that means that the price for money is higher and the quantity demanded for money is lower. Then money supply is constant because it is controlled by central bank. We remember it, vertical line. Money supply, 1,600. Good. So this is about money market. And first of all, in point A, we should find equilibrium in the goods market. In point B, in the money market, then we'll cross them and find total equilibrium. Point A. In point A, we should derive IS relation. What means IS? What is this?
Investments.
Savings, investment savings.
Yeah, in savings. I forgot the second one.
Investments always equal to savings. It is you remember this, yes? It is the condition for equilibrium in the goods market. And we can rewrite this connection as the formula for GDP, as in Keynes and Cross. Our output that is produced, in fact, always equal in equilibrium in the goods market, equal to planned expenses of all economic agents, planned expenses of households consumption, planned expenses of firms' investments, planned expenses of government spendings. Yes, and we're working in the closed economy, so we do not consider net export. So put everything in this condition, and we will find a formula for IS relation. The relation between GDP and interest rate, such that goods market is in equilibrium. So let's put everything. Y equals to consumption 200 plus 0.25 multiplied by, here, disposable income is GDP minus taxes. Taxes equals to 200. Plus investments. 150 plus 0.25 multiplied by GDP minus 1000 multiplied by interest rate. And you see, we have here constants. Yes, we have here GDP, aggregate output, and interest rate. So let us put everything with Y to the left and find formula. So Y minus 0.25 multiplied by Y minus 0.25 multiplied by Y equals to all constants, 200 plus 0.25 multiplied by minus 200, it's 50. Minus 50 plus 150, all constants, then, and with the interest rate minus 1000 multiplied by interest rate. So from here, 0.5 multiplied by Y equals to 3. I forgot something, no? 150, yes. I forgot government spendings, 250 here, plus 250. So here, 550 minus 1000 multiplied by I. And then last, GDP equals to 1100 minus 2000 multiplied by I. This is the formula for IS relation. These are all all relations between interest rate and GDP such that goods market is in equilibrium. This will show us, this line will show us for each interest rate in the economy, what will be the equilibrium GDP. So you see that it has negative slope as investments as a part of GDP is negatively connected with interest rate. Yes. And the higher interest rate, the lower equilibrium GDP in the goods market. And we can draw the graph. It's a linear function with negative slope. Let's draw. So ISLM in what axis? Horizontal axis, equilibrium output. Vertical axis, interest rate. And let's draw it. Linear function, I like to draw by 2 points. If interest rate is equal to 0, GDP 1100, so here. And vice versa. If GDP equal to 0, interest rate is equal to 1100 over 2000. It is 0.55. And draw this line. Write down, always name lines for us to understand what you have drawn. Yes. Maxim, you have question?
Yeah, so is I always going to be between 0 and 1 as you have it on your vertical axis?
No, not always. It is logical that interest rate should be between, I don't know, 0% and 100%. But in some tasks, you can find 500%. Like
yeah, okay, thank you.
25. Or also, we know such cases when interest rates are negative also. We see such situations in real world. So interest rates can be like -2%. But in your course, we have here numbers, and you can find 500%. You can find here 5 maybe. Okay. Okay. So one more thing I forgot to write for you. Let's look one more time on investments. So here you have constant. This is autonomous investments. Yes, as a autonomous consumption, investments that do not depend on GDP. Then 0.25 is marginal propensity to invest. Marginal propensity to invest, we discussed it when we were talking about paradox of thrift in Keynesian cross class. Here GDP, okay, and this 1000 is like connection between interest rate and investments. This 1000 will show us how investments will change if interest rate will change by 1%. This is the change in investments when we have change in interest rate, like this connection. Or you can write not in changes, not in deltas, but like derivative. If these changes are very, very small. Like this change divided by change, delta divided by delta, it's when we were talking about, I don't know, multipliers. I think you are familiar with such things. Okay, then next. So one more time. This IS relation will show us for each interest rate, what will be equilibrium output in the goods market. So for this interest rate, equilibrium output in the goods market, like this, yes? For lower interest rates, higher investments, that means higher equilibrium output in the goods market. So that means negative connection. Next, point B. In point B, we should find LM. What means LM? Remember?
Liquidity of money.
Liquidity money. Yes. So this is this line will show us for each GDP what will be the equilibrium interest rate that is defined in the money market, such that money market is in equilibrium. Liquidity money. And this will show us money market equilibrium. Equilibrium for each output. Money market is in equilibrium when demand for money equals to money supply. Easy. Yes. Money demand equals to money supply. So let us equalize demand and supply for money. Demand for money 2y minus 8,000 multiplied by I. Supply 1,600. And from here we should find like in IS. Yes, everything with y to the left, everything with I to the right. 2y equals to 1,800 plus 8,000, and y equals to 800 plus 4,000 multiplied by I. So we found LM. This is formula for LM. And you see here, this is the connection. Higher GDP. Why here is positive connection? Let us explain. If GDP is higher, that means that we need more money for transactions. Yes, so the demand for money will increase. And you remember that demand for money is positively related with GDP. And higher demand, higher the price for money, or higher the price in each market. That means price for money is interest rate. So that means higher interest rate. So this is how we explain this positive connection between interest rate and GDP, such that money market is in equilibrium. Okay, you see that this line is linear function with positive slope. Yes, how we will draw it? If by using one point, if interest rate is equal to 0, GDP equals to 800. So interest rate equal to 0, put 0 here, GDP equals to 800. And then positive slope, LM. So what LM will show us on the graph? For each GDP level, what will be the equilibrium interest rate? Such that money market is in equilibrium. Higher GDP, higher equilibrium interest rate. So we see positive relation. So questions about LM, how we found it? I think LM is even easier than IS. And in point A, B, in C and D, we should find equilibrium. We should find equilibrium interest rate and equilibrium GDP. What we should do, please? Who wants? I draw everything. So equilibrium GDP and interest rate when IS and LM are crossed. Yes, we should cross equilibrium in the goods market and equilibrium in the money market, and such that we will find this equilibrium GDP and equilibrium interest rate. Agree? So how to do it, Anastasia?
Do we need just to like we have equilibrium GDP, we have equilibrium GDP like in supply and in demand. It's like 1,100 minus 2,000 multiplied by I, and it should be equal to 800 plus 4,000 multiplied by I.
Yes,
Here we will find I.
We equalize GDP in IS and GDP in LM. Yes, good. And from here we will find equilibrium interest rate. Maybe somebody calculated, no? Okay, we can solve it. So put constant to the left, 300 equals to 6,000 multiplied by I. So from here, I, interest rate, will be equal to 300 over 6,000. And this is 0.05 or 5%. Here will be 5%. And how to find GDP? Easy. Yes, we should put this equilibrium interest rate in IS or LM, like in demand or supply. Yes, when we cross them. So equilibrium GDP will be equal to, for example, let's put in IS. equilibrium interest rate. This is formula for IS. $1,000, yes? Our equilibrium GDP is 1,000. Guys, any questions how we found it? We crossed two lines and that's all. And solved the system with two equations and two unknowns and found two things. Yes, these two unknowns. Equilibrium interest rate and equilibrium GDP. So we found the cross of IS and LM. And this is equilibrium. Both in money market and goods market, when both these markets are in equilibrium. So next, E. In point E, we should find in such equilibrium situation how much households will consume and how much investors will invest. What we should do, we know the formulas for consumption and investment. Let's put our interest rate and GDP in these formulas and count. Easy. So consumption put into formula 200 plus 0.25 multiplied by equilibrium GDP 1,000 minus taxes 200. And investments, also let's put into formula 150 plus 0.25 equilibrium GDP 1,000 minus 1,000 multiplied by interest rate. Maybe somebody counted. No? Okay. Here will be here 800 over 4 is 200.
400. Yeah.
Thank you. And investments here was 50 plus 250 and 150. No, 350. We have. No?
Yeah, you calculated right.
So then, and let us check that we calculated everything right. We should check that our GDP that consists of equilibrium consumption, equilibrium investments, and equilibrium government spendings, but they are constant. Yes, always. Let us check that we calculated everything right. So consumption 400, investments 350, government spendings 250 from the task. And this is exactly 1,000. So equilibrium output, equilibrium income, yes, aggregate output, aggregate income consists of spendings, equilibrium spendings of all economic agents. Yes, we checked it. Okay, that's right, checked. Checked. So next, F. In point F, we will talk about stimulating monetary policy. Central bank, by doing any operation, I don't know, decreased required reserves ratio, or by buying these bonds from households and firms. But anyway, central bank increased money supply to 1,840. It was before 1,600, and now it is 1,840. So central bank increased money supply. So let us, before calculating, let us think what will happen. So in the money market, what will happen? Here M1, here interest rate. So demand, same, money supply increased. Yes? One. What will happen with equilibrium interest rate? It decreased. Yes, as in each market in micro course. Yes. So if money supply increases, that means that equilibrium that interest rate decreases. And this is true for each GDP, because GDP, because we do not have GDP here. GDP for us here can be any. Yes. So in the money market, we only find interest rate. In the goods market, we only find GDP. And when we cross ISLM, we find both. Yes, we cross them, two equilibriums in goods and in money market. So if in money market interest rate decreases, that is true for each GDP. And what is happening with LM? Let's see. Now interest rates are lower. For example, LM was like this, and now interest rates are lower for each level of output. So interest rates are lower for each level of output. You see, shift down of LM. So this was LM1, LM2. That means that LM shifts right or down. Shifts, okay, let's say down. And when we cross it with old IS, what is happening with equilibrium? You see that interest rate is lower, yes? And the main thing that equilibrium output is higher. You see, you cross from here to here. Equilibrium output is higher. That means that we really have stimulating monetary policy. Central bank, I don't know, prints money, and this, in the short run, this increases aggregate output, aggregate income, GDP, as you want, how you name it. That means equilibrium interest rate decreases, equilibrium output increases. So this how to explain like in economic terms, and now we can calculate everything. Yes, let's do it. Maybe questions about this? Okay. So let us solve for new equilibrium. We see that IS is the same, so we do not need to find IS, new IS. We need to find new LM. Maxim, you have a question? Or?
Yeah, I got a question about the equilibrium here on the second graph. Do we have to, here. Do we have any kind of formula for the second one?
For this?
Yeah.
We will find it.
Oh, we are going to find it. Okay.
Now we have we had formula for old LM. Yes. Now we will find new LM function Yes, and we will cross it with old IS and we will find new equilibrium. So what we will say about new LM? Our demand for money stays the same, but supply for money is higher right now. Yes. So demand for money same, and we have new money supply. Let's equalize. All demand to y minus 8,000 I, new supply 1,840. Good. And from here we'll find new equation for new LM. Y equals to 1,840 plus 8,000 I over 2. And this is 920 plus 4,000 I. Before, so this is the formula for new LM. Before we had, before changing the supply for money, we had here 800. Slope is the same, 4,000. We had 800, now we have 920. And we can draw it on the graph. So if interest rate is equal to 0, new GDP is equal to 920. So we start from 920 with the same slope. Parallel shift down, you see? And now we should cross old IS with new LM. And we will find your equilibrium. Where to write? Now let's cross new LM with old IS. Old new LM 920 plus 4,000 I. Old IS was 1,100 minus 2,000 I. From here, we will find new interest rate. And then new GDP. Guys, please, maybe somebody will calculate it for us.
It's 3%, as far as I believe.
Yes, thank you. 0.03 or 3%. Then we should put this new interest rate, which is lower than before. Yes, let's compare. Let's say that it is lower than 0.05 that was before. So here, 0.03. Interest rate new. And new GDP, we should put new interest rate into IS or LM, vice versa, into LM or IS. Never mind. Yes, let's put into LM, for example, 920 plus 4,000 multiplied by 0.03. And this is okay. This is 1,040. And we see that monetary policy is really expansionary monetary policy because equilibrium level of GDP now is higher than before. It increased by 40. Also, we are asked to calculate equilibrium new consumption level and new investment level. But first of all, before calculating, let's think. If now aggregate output, that means aggregate income is higher, that means that we will consume more because our disposable income will increase. Agree? So if aggregate income increases, that means that disposable income will increase. That means that consumption will increase. And let's check, let's calculate. So new consumption, put into our formula of consumption 200 plus 0.25, new GDP 1040 minus taxes 200, and this will be equal to, okay, I calculated it for you. No, I didn't calculate it. Let's do it together. So by 10, it increased by 10.
410, probably.
Yes, 410.
Yeah.
So you see that consumption increased by 10, which is, that's right. It's bigger than old consumption that was equal to 400. So the change in consumption equals to 10. Then new level of investments. Put our new interest rate. No, before this, let's check. So GDP increased. That means investments will increase. Investors wants to invest more because marginal propensity to invest is positive. Then interest rate decreased. That means now it is cheaper to borrow. That means we will invest more. Cheaper to borrow. So we will invest more. So our conclusion is that investments will increase. And let's check. New investment level is 150 plus 0.25, 40 minus 1000 multiplied by 0.03. And this is, it should increase by 30, but I don't remember what it was before. It was 350 and now it is 380. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, I hope. So now we see that investments really increased and it is bigger than it was before. It was 350. And we see that the change in investments is positive and equals to 30. They increased by 30. And what conclusion we make? Government spendings stays the same because they are constant. They are instrument of fiscal policy. Then consumption increased by 10, investments increased by 30, and total GDP increased by how much? By 40. Yes, GDP increased by 40. Here, GDP new 140. So our new, the change in GDP consists of the changes in all parts of aggregate output. So change in consumption 10 plus 10, change in investments plus 30, change in government spendings is 0 because it's constant. This is 14. Okay, checked. These questions
But why do if in the here we see such good consequences of the increased money supply? Why in the long run it leads to bad consequences and inflation?
In the short run, we assume in your ISLM model is a model for short run, for equilibrium in the short run, and we assume that prices are constant.
Ah,
Right.
I
But
get
in the long run, prices will change. That means we'll all go to inflation. Yes. A good question. Thank you. Yes. Next we have other policy A, B, C, D, F, J. In point J, set money supply to initial level. Yes, money supply same as before, 1,600 as in point A. Now suppose that government spending increases to 400. So now we have increased government spending. That means stimulating fiscal policy. Stimulating fiscal policy. Government spendings increased to 400, and they were before to 400, and they were before 250. So government spendings increases. And we should summarize the effects. So first of all, let's write down what is happening. But it's simple, yes, because if government spendings increases, that means GDP. Yes, government spending is a part of GDP, is a part of aggregate output. So aggregate output increases for each interest rate. Yes, here we speak about goods market. For each interest rate. Yes, here we speak about goods market. And what is happening with IS? Where we should shift it, please? IS shifts right, left, up, down, where? If GDP increases for each interest rate.
It's just right.
To the right, yes. You see? I will erase after this. For each interest rate, GDP, equilibrium GDP in the goods market increases. Yes, IS shifts right. Okay, I will withdraw everything. Shifts right. So LM stays the same, IS shifts right. And what we can say about equilibrium GDP and equilibrium interest rate? When we're talking about fiscal policy.
They should increase.
They should increase, yes. We see that here GDP increases. Yes, we move from this to this equilibrium, and interest rate also increases. And why interest rate is increases? Why we move along LM curve? Because if in the goods market we have a higher aggregate output, we need more money for transactions. Yes, that means that money demand increases and the price for money increases. Interest rate, equilibrium interest rate will increase. You see? Okay, let's explain. As we need as GDP increases and economic agents need more money for transactions. That means that money demand will increase, and when money demand increases, this is the move along the LM curve. Interest rate increases. This explanation about why interest rate increases. So, okay, then let us, what we should count. LM stays the same as in point A and B, but IS new. Let us write down. New IS. So, GDP equals to, one more time, consumption plus investments plus new government spendings. So we should add a new constant. Yes, here. Let's do it. GDP equals to 200, consumption plus 0.25 y minus 200, disposable income plus investment 150 plus 0.25 y minus 1000 y plus new government spendings 400. And you see we have only change in constant, so it will be parallel shift. Yes, so from here we will find formula for new IS. Let me write down 1400 minus 2000 I. This is new IS. Let us write in the system Alt LM and then cross them. Alt LM was y equals to 800 plus 4000 I. This was LM. And now cross them. And we will find new levels of GDP and interest rate. So let's solve this system with two equations and two unknowns. Here, equilibrium interest rate mu will be equal to, it should be higher than before. So it will be 0.1 or 10%. Equilibrium new level of output equals to 1200. Then let's compare. It's exactly bigger than before. Before it was 0.05 and 1200 bigger than it was before, then 1000. Yes. So okay, then we should find consumption and new level of investments. Consumption easy because we see GDP increased. That means disposable income increased. That means consumption will increase. And let's check it. New consumption level. Put your GDP into formula. It will be. I will tell you. 450. And it is exactly bigger than 400. So consumption increased. It's easy. But more interesting about investment. More interesting about investments. What is happening with investments? On the one hand, GDP increases. That means that investments will increase. But on the other hand, interest rate also increases. And this will lead to less borrowings and investments down. And we do not know what will happen with investments at the end. Yes, so we should check it. Let's do it. Maybe somebody can calculate faster than me and tell me the answer for investments. So, oh, sorry. With 150 here, 300 minus 100. It is 350, and I think it was 350 also. Yes, so it is equal to our investment level as before. So you see that these two effects killed each other. Yes. Question, please.
But didn't it just? I think that was simple because when you have just like the one like thing which should, for example, increase something, but at the same time you have the thing which decreases, like the everything should stay the same. I mean, it was simple from your explanation before we even calculated it.
But we don't know the strengths of these two effects. So it can be that one effect will overlap other effect. So it can be that GDP effect will be stronger and investment will go up a little bit. But or vice versa. Yes.
I see. Yeah.
But here we see that these two effects are of the same strength. Yes, and that's all. But it can be other situation here. Okay, so it stays the same. Consumption increased and investments stays the same, and we can make conclusions. What conclusions we can make? That, for example, if in our country we need to stimulate economy and to stimulate investment activity, what we should do? We should make monetary stimulating policy or fiscal policy we should use. If we need a high level of investments, it's better to use fiscal or monetary policy.
Monetary?
Yes, because in monetary policy, interest rates are going down and investments will increase. Yes, will exactly increase. But in fiscal policy, we see these two effects, and investments will increase not so much. They can stay the same, or they can decrease. Okay, good. But here also we see that when we used in this task, when we used our monetary policy, GDP increased only by 40, yes, and when we used fiscal policy, GDP increased by how much? By 200, yes. So in our task, it's better to use fiscal policy, but we cannot compare because in fiscal policy, government spends 400 more, and in monetary policy, I don't know, central bank prints $240 million more, and we cannot compare what these two what government and central bank does. Okay, good. I don't know what to do. So let us do number 1.a for us to show that we understood what is happening in the SLM. And for you at home, there will be B and B and C. Okay, let's do number A in number 1A for us to understand how to write down these explanations, okay? So for each of these shocks, say whether it will shift the S, shift the LM, shift neither of the two. What are the directions of the shift? Okay, point A, decrease in the discount rate. Who wants? Discount rate, what is discount rate? Who knows the definition for discount rate? Maxim, please.
Yes, it's when central bank given the loans, loans to the commercial banks to increase their capabilities to do something on the markets right now.
It's the rate for which central bank gives credits, gives loans to commercial banks. And now, if this discount rate is lower, this is good for our banking system.
Yes, because they will in general ask later for less percent for their users, basically the people who are the clients of the bank, because they higher the discount rate for the bank, then the bank itself will have to set even a higher one for their clients.
Mm-hmm. So at the end, you missed a lot of explanations. And in the end, interest rate should decrease. Yes, for banks. In the end, interest rate, equilibrium interest rate should decrease. But let us explain what is happening here in the middle. Yes, but you're right. If discount rate is low right now, banks will have more opportunities to ask for credit from central bank, and that means that our commercial banks need less reserves. Yes, less excess reserves in their banks, and they can give more credits. Agree? So that means this connection. That means that our excess reserves will decrease. And where we have excess reserves ratio, where we have required reserves ratio, where we have required reserves ratio. In money multiplier, yes, as you remember, let us write down. Money multiplier equals to CR plus 1 over CR plus, and here we wrote required reserves ratio, but also we can add excess reserves ratio if our banks also save extra money for not to be bankrupt. So here, if excess reserves are lower, then banking system, system of commercial banks can produce more money. Money multiplier will increase. Yes. And if money multiplier increases, what increases?
The supply.
Supply for money, yes, exactly. Money supply increases. So we see here stimulating monetary policy. Yes, money supply increases. If supply in each market increases, that means that interest rate decreases. As you have said before. Yes, interest rate decreases. One more time. This we spoke about money market. Yes, that means interest rate decreases for each GDP level. And what is happening with LM? interest rate decreases for each GDP level. That means LM shift where? Shifts LM curve.
Down.
Down, yes. LM shifts down. And if LM shifts down, what is happening with equilibrium? Equilibrium interest rate in the economy and equilibrium GDP in the economy.
They're going less, like also.
Equilibrium interest rate is lower and equilibrium GDP is lower. Why it is lower? No, it is higher. I will show you. I will show you because we have stimulating monetary policy. Let me show, and we will finish. So here GDP, here interest rate. As we have said, IS like this, LM was like this, LM1, and now liquidity money curve shifts down. So interest rates are lower for each GDP level, yes? And we see that interest rate is lower, that's true, but GDP is higher. You see? Why? Why is it so? Interest rates are lower, that means less expensive credits, it's cheaper to borrow. That means investments will go up and GDP will go up. Let us explain this. Investments are lower, or interest rate is lower. That means that cheaper to borrow. That means higher investments. And this, in the end, will lead to higher GDP. You see? So this is the consequence of stimulating monetary policy. And this is how you should explain. Also, you can draw a money market, but we draw it so many times that I don't want. So money supply increases, lower interest rates. This for the first part of explanation, And the second part of explanation when LM, this is for second part, the graph. Okay. Please prepare at home answer for B and for C, and we will check it next time if we will have time, but I'm not sure. Okay, so let me write down who answered today, who asked questions, who raised hand even one time. Смотрите, значит, так, Анастасия. Мы там посчитали, и у нас, значит, семинары, у нас 9 семинаров по макро, они заканчиваются, чуть ли не 19 марта. Максим Никитин. Вот, и, короче, у нас там будет еще неделя, да, на которой будет еще один семинар, но он будет уже без темы, и вот на вот этом семинаре будет а-ля консультация. Мы там можем вот что-то доделать, что мы не доделали. Вот, он прям будет в расписании. Так, Никитин, Иван Замковой. Ой, сейчас я это видео поставлю, остановлю.